What's up, guys? Welcome to Rennthusiast. I'm Will, and if you are here because you were interested in learning more about the notorious Widowmaker, the Porsche 930, then I got great news for you because that's exactly what this video is about. In today's video, a 930 owner, dude by the name of Chuck, really good guy, takes us through his gorgeous Guards Red, almost all original 930. So he's going to talk to us about how he picked the car up, and I love those stories, by the way. I've done several of these interviews, actually many of these interviews, and it's always fascinating to hear how guys pick up their 911s. But he's going to take us through that part of the story. He's going to talk us through what it's been like to own the 930. He's going to tell us whether or not it's been expensive and reliable and all that good stuff. He's going to take us for a ride in the car. He actually let me drive it too, and it's one of those cars you better pay attention when you have it on boost. And then at the end of the video, he's going to tell us whether or not he thinks the 930 deserves the reputation as the Widowmaker. Before we jump into that though, I'd like to invite you to check out my merchandise below. I've come up with some fun air-cooled t-shirts and coffee mugs and all that, and we all love our Porsche t-shirts. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to this channel if you love Porsche 911s. Let us now jump into the interview. All right, guys, I'm super excited about today's 911 owner interview video. As you can see here, I have a gorgeous Guards Red Porsche 911 Turbo, a 930. I have never had the chance to interview an owner of one of these cars, and so I'm really grateful to my friend Chuck here for being willing to share the car with me and you. And so he's going to talk us through the car. So Chuck, I'll throw it over to you, man. If you could just kind of start with how you bought the car and what drew you to it, we'll just go from there.
You know, what drew me to a Porsche was a good friend of mine. I didn't know he had a Porsche collection. I just knew him as a neighbor of mine at the lake. And one day he goes, "Hey, can you help me bring some cars back to my shop? They're down at the dealership for the anniversary, just a little eye candy down there, and I just need some help getting the cars back." And I'm driving this 30-some-year-old 911, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's not a squeak or a rattle. And then just the analog driving experience just got me. And instead of looking at buying something new, I said, no, this is what I want. But I wasn't going to buy a turbo. I was just going to buy, you know, an SC. But every one of them I looked at, there was something, you know, wrong with them. And again, my friend had a whole collection of these, and he said, you know, if you'll spend the money and get the turbo, you're going to get a much stronger car, more reliable car, and you're going to have more fun. And so that's what did it. That's how I ended up in my very first Porsche being, you know, what they call the Widowmaker, the 930. But I love the car. It is my forever Porsche.
So you bought this from somebody you know?
Yeah.
So that's huge. There are a lot of mystery cars floating out there that people just want to get out of without having to put a bunch of money into them. So I think it's powerful. You got to buy from a known. So that's huge in and of itself. So since you've owned it, what have you done to it? I know it's largely original, but talk me through some or any of the mods you've done.
That car is all original except for three easy things. I've tinted the windows, which helps with the proverbial air conditioning issue. I put a Billy Boat exhaust on it. And I got the original carpet, but I put a beautiful red square weave carpet. One of the things I think so unusual about that car is it's red over red. I have never seen another red over red 911, 930. So I love it. It's one of the neat things about that car. But other than that, that is the original paint, the original leather, the original glass, numbers matching car.
Yeah, the interior is insane. Of course, I'll share a fair amount of footage of that interior in this video. So you did some elective mods to it that you wanted to do. How has reliability been? I mean, you know, in so much as you're comfortable sharing, I mean, what have you had to do, and has this been an expensive endeavor to keep it where you want it?
You know, I mean, I guess that's relative. The 930 is not that much more expensive to maintain than a normally aspirated 911. Yes, I did have to get the turbo, you know, rebuilt. But other than that, it's just the standard stuff any 35-year-old car is going to need to be done to it. You know, the wheel bearings and things like that. But it's never let me down. Well, one exception, the turbo seals went out, and I just drove home, had no turbo power.
But you know, you told me about that earlier off camera, and I would submit to you, like, yeah, you lost power, but it still didn't leave you stranded.
No,
you know what I mean?
Did not
like,
leave me stranded.
It's knock on wood. Actually, I don't want to jinx myself. None of mine have ever just like left me out in the wilderness not able to get home.
Right. So the car has been very reliable, and I rip it. We go on these drives. I never abuse the car, but I run the car like the way it was made.
Well,
I mean,
and they love that, right? Like they like the higher res.
They
I mean,
do.
The Porsche build quality and the engineering philosophy, like that's how they should be driven.
I mean, Martin Steger, everyone knows around North Carolina Martin because he began his Porsche career on the 917s, and he was the mechanic at the shop where I bought it at the time. And he told me, he says, every time you drive that car, I want you to take it at 5,000 or 6,000 RPMs, at least just once. If you don't, you're going to not take care of that engine.
I've got my Cayman down there. It's very low mileage of 14. And one of the first things I started doing with it is I just started hammering on it. And it has improved, like the drivability has improved ever since I started doing that. I think the previous owners didn't rev out that motor. And these motors, and I'm sure the 930 is not any different,
Right.
they like to be wrung out.
They do. They do like to be wrung out. You can briefly hit the red line. There's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes in a situation on the mountains, you know, it's either we'll do a upshift to third for a nanosecond or just take it into the red line for a second or two. You're going to be fine.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So speaking of ripping, I mean, you know, we do go up into the twisties quite a bit here. I'm looking forward to rolling with you, by the way, at our event at the end of April. But talk to me about how you manage the boost in those tight turns. And so before I let you answer, I'll just say, for those of you in the know, you know that there's like a little bit of a reputation of this car to maybe surprise you mid-turn when the boost comes on. So how do you manage this car in tight twisties?
You know, the power own oversteer is exaggerated. This car's only gotten loose on me one time, and I was just trying to overcompensate for the lack of power below 2,000 RPMs. And so I had just nailed the throttle before the apex. And but other than that one time when it got completely sideways on me, it's just not the issue. The issue you have to be careful of with these 911s, all of them, is the throttle lift oversteer. You like we were talking earlier, you know, you learn to drive a 911 the right way, you learn how to drive fast the right way. So you do all your braking in a straight line, and that way when you hit the corner, you're in the power, you're putting the weight back on those tires. But if you have to lift in the middle of a corner or worse, slam on the brakes, it will spin. So that's where the Widowmaker reputation is slamming on the brakes in the middle of the corner. That's not what you want to do at the limits.
Well, you know, the reputation before I drove this car had me, well, not this particular car, but I've driven a 930 once. It had me very nervous to drive the car, almost like it had some supernatural desire to kill me, right? Like that's what you read about, that's what you hear about. I found it to be very manageable, very predictable, and just not scary at all. And when it comes on, it's exhilarating, super fast.
Oh, it puts a smile on your face every time.
But it's controllable. It's not like it sneaks up and bites you. You know,
right.
I think you got to be an idiot or inexperienced or just reckless to put yourself at risk in one of these cars, I think.
I mean, if you're a driver, if you enjoy driving.
That's fair.
Yeah, you know, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that surge. And of course, you know, in the mid-70s when these things first came out, this was a powerful car. And I think today, here 35 years later, 40 years later, you're kind of used to that kind of power.
Let's talk about that, right? You and I were chatting a little bit about some of the group drives you go on. So you're out there with like 997s.
And 991s.
991s, and like you're keeping pace, right?
This car will keep the pace.
Then you guys stop and get gas, and more people want to come take a look at your car.
Yes.
Than the modern 911s.
Yes, yes. And you know, the water-cooled guys are always, it's funny because, you know, every other gas stop, you're raising the lid and adding oil to the thing, and that's just and you check the oil with the engine running, and they're just not used to that.
Yep.
Well, you know, the turbo uses oil to cool down the turbo, and so I mean, I joke, I call it a diesel. I mean, the manual says it could use like 3 quarts per 1,000 miles, and that's why it holds 16 quarts.
So I've noticed that these 930s, and I don't know if it's selective perception, but I feel like on social media, I'm seeing more buzz about them. I'm watching the values. I feel like they're creeping up. I've never been really, really close to the values, but I just feel like these cars are getting hotter. Have you noticed the same thing?
Yes, and the thing is, they're so rare. I mean, they're not a low production car, but you just never see them. And so I think there's a lot of interest now in going back to the cars that don't drive themselves and give you a real experience. It's almost like driving an old Jeep Wrangler. You know, it's just a very organic, rewarding experience. And, you know, for those of us who have high pressure jobs, when you drive one of these things, all you can think about is driving it. That is so mental, mind clearing.
Yes, for sure. Well, let's close up with any advice you might have for somebody who's watching this video, thinking about, you know, hey, I want to buy one of these cars. I want to do all the research I can. They trip across this video. You as an owner, what would you tell that person who's in the market?
Well, if you're looking to buy, you know, a 930, definitely get a PPI by a 930 expert, not just a Porsche mechanic, but someone who really knows the 930s, because they are a little bit different. And that'll be, you know, money well spent. And be a driver, be aggressive, but also be humble. And as soon as you can, even if it's just a lead follow at a track, go do it and do that throttle lift so that you understand how that car is going to rotate. When you lift the throttle in the middle of the corner, that can actually become your best friend because it can actually help you rotate the car. But you don't want to do it for the first time and it surprise you on a blind car.
Yeah, on a public road, you know, on a switchback. You don't want that.
Right.
Well, cool. Well, Chuck, thank you again, man. I appreciate you spending some time with me, and I love this car.
Thank you, Will. Enjoyed it.